Stop breathing. Now imagine that feeling lasting forever. Because if Earth lost its atmosphere, even for a few minutes, every complex life form on this planet would be in immediate, irreversible danger. And here's the twist most people get wrong. We wouldn't freeze to death first. We wouldn't even suffocate first. The real sequence of events is far more violent, far more fascinating, and backed entirely by physics. Let's break this down carefully. Earth's atmosphere weighs about 5.15 quadrillion tons. That invisible blanket of nitrogen, oxygen, argon, carbon dioxide, and trace gases exerts a pressure of about 101.3 kilopascals at sea level. That's 14.7 pounds per square inch. It doesn't feel heavy because our bodies evolved within it. But remove it instantly, the first thing that happens is explosive decompression. Air doesn't just disappear. It rushes outward at extreme speed into space. Winds would roar faster than any hurricane ever recorded. For comparison, the strongest hurricanes on Earth reach around 300 kilometers per hour. Sudden global decompression would generate supersonic shock waves in many regions. Buildings not designed for vacuum differentials would rupture. Windows would shatter outward. Aircraft in flight would lose lift instantly and begin ballistic descent. But here's the first pattern interrupt. You would not instantly explode. Human skin is strong enough to contain internal pressure. NASA vacuum exposure data shows that the body swells, but does not burst. However, without atmospheric pressure, oxygen in your lungs would rapidly diffuse out. You would lose consciousness in roughly 10 to 15 seconds. Not because of cold, because of hypoxia. And here's where it gets even more disturbing. At pressures below about 6.3 kilopascals, known as the Armstrong limit, water boils at normal human body temperature. That means saliva on your tongue and moisture in your eyes would begin to vaporize. This process is called ebullition. Your blood would not boil inside your veins. It's pressurized by your circulatory system, but exposed fluids would. If atmospheric loss were total and sustained, irreversible brain damage would begin after about 2 minutes due to lack of oxygen. Now let's zoom out. The atmosphere does far more than let us breathe. It regulates temperature. Without it, Earth would start behaving more like the moon. Right now, Earth's average surface temperature is about 15 degrees Celsius. The atmosphere, especially greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and water vapor, traps heat through the greenhouse effect. Without that thermal blanket, Earth's average temperature would drop to around minus 18 degrees Celsius over time. But here's another pattern interrupt. We wouldn't freeze instantly. Temperature change takes time. Oceans store enormous thermal energy. However, without atmospheric pressure, liquid water becomes unstable. Water requires pressure to remain liquid at moderate temperatures. Remove the atmosphere, and oceans would begin to boil, not because they're hot, but because pressure drops. Simultaneously, evaporation would cool the surface rapidly. The oceans would begin freezing from the top down, while also sublimating into space. Over time, much of Earth's water would be lost. This is not science fiction. Mars experienced atmospheric loss billions of years ago, largely due to solar wind stripping away its lighter gases after it lost its global magnetic field. Which brings us to something most people never think about. The atmosphere protects us from radiation. Earth's magnetic field deflects charged solar particles, but the atmosphere absorbs harmful ultraviolet radiation and cosmic rays. Without it, radiation levels at the surface would spike dramatically. Within hours, unshielded organisms would experience lethal radiation exposure. Plants would die rapidly, not just from lack of carbon dioxide pressure, but from desiccation and radiation damage. And without plants, oxygen production stops. Even if the atmosphere somehow returned later, the biosphere collapse would already be catastrophic. Now here's a controversial angle. Some people believe humans could survive underground. Partially true. Deep underground bunkers with independent oxygen supplies and pressure control could temporarily sustain life. Submarines might survive if internal pressure systems remain intact. But here's the reality check. Modern infrastructure depends on atmospheric pressure differences. Power plants rely on air for combustion. Jet engines require oxygen. Even cooling systems in many facilities depend on atmospheric heat exchange. Global power grids would fail almost immediately. Satellites wouldn't stay unaffected either. Ironically, without atmospheric drag, low Earth orbit satellites would remain in orbit longer. But that's irrelevant if civilization collapses below. Now let's talk about sound. In a vacuum, sound cannot travel. The planet would go silent. No wind noise after the initial blast. No voices. No oceans crashing. Just silence. Another overlooked consequence: meteoroids. Every day, about 48.5 tons of meteoritic material enters Earth's atmosphere. Most of it burns up due to friction. Without an atmosphere, even small meteors would reach the surface unimpeded. Impact frequency at ground level would increase dramatically. Now think about aviation. There are typically over 8,000 to 13,000 aircraft in the sky at any given moment globally. Without air, wings generate no lift. Every plane becomes an uncontrolled projectile. Emergency oxygen masks provide only about 12 to 20 minutes of oxygen, and that assumes cabin pressure remains. In total atmospheric loss, that assumption fails. The global casualty count would be immediate and massive. But here's the biggest long-term shift. Weather would cease entirely. No clouds, no rain, no wind cycles driven by pressure gradients. The water cycle collapses. Without atmospheric pressure, rivers would initially surge due to pressure imbalance, then begin evaporating and freezing. Over months to years, Earth would transform into a dry, frozen desert world with extreme temperature swings between day and night, potentially over 200 degrees Celsius difference in some regions, similar to the moon. Daytime would be brutally hot under direct sunlight. Nighttime would be lethally cold. Life as we know it depends on atmospheric stability. Now let's address the elephant in the room. Could this realistically happen? Under known natural processes, Earth cannot suddenly lose its entire atmosphere overnight. Our gravity is strong enough to retain most gases. Thermal escape happens gradually over geological time. Solar wind stripping is minimized by our magnetosphere. A sudden total atmospheric disappearance would require an unknown catastrophic mechanism, something not supported by current astrophysical understanding. And that's important, because this scenario is a thought experiment, not a prediction, but it reveals something profound. We tend to think of the ground beneath us as our foundation. It's not. It's the air above us. 5 quadrillion tons of invisible gas make complex life possible, and we barely notice it. Every breath you take is supported by a pressure system extending hundreds of kilometers upward, gradually thinning into space. Remove it, and within seconds, consciousness fades. Within days, ecosystems collapse. Within months to years, oceans transform, and Earth begins to resemble a lifeless terrestrial planet. No explosion, no dramatic cinematic fireball, just physics, just pressure loss, radiation, thermodynamics, and silence. If this perspective changed the way you see the sky above you, follow for more science explained in ways that make you rethink reality. Now I'm curious, what do you think would disappear first in a world without atmosphere? Humanity or the oceans? Let's talk in the comments.